Now, I've been talking about the problem with the wokery that currently seems to be running through the schools of this country. We just had a great call from a headmaster there who says that as a person who, shall we say, leans to the right in terms of whatever it is that's going on, politically speaking, it's a very, very difficult job to do because so many people in the teaching profession are left-wing. And they don't, of course, as we know, people on the left have any sort of time for anyone who has a different set of values, a different set of views. But we're going to talk now about companies and corporations that sometimes think that being woke is a good idea, because we're told that Starbucks have now considered actually getting rid of their Facebook page because of all the nasty, hateful comments they get whenever they try and put out some kind of virtue signalling message. Let's talk to Emma Webb, social commentator, of course, who keeps an eye on these things. Emma, very good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Mike.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us. I mean, it's not the first time that some of these companies have come up against the, the dreaded actual common sense of the ordinary people. You know, we've seen Ben and Jerry's getting a lot of flack for pointing out that, we should be welcoming people coming on dinghies from France. We've seen now the latest situation with Starbucks saying they're going to quit Facebook. I mean, as if anybody would care if they quit Facebook.
Yeah, you're right. Ben and Jerry's put out this advert, didn't they? Basically backing the defund the police, Black Lives Matter line. And they actually have a head of activism at Ben and Jerry's. And so when you go to a company like Starbucks, you're really buying your coffee from what has essentially become a lobby group. Right. And so they have to make a decision when it comes to the responses that they get on Facebook. If they want to back controversial campaigns or causes like Black Lives Matter, or as they have done, the Mermaid charity, which is a controversial transgender charity for children that wants the NHS to give cross-sex hormones to children under 16. If they're going to back causes, political causes like that, or even like Planned Parenthood, which is the biggest funder of abortions in the United States. Obviously, these are controversial causes that are politically sensitive. So if they're going to start posting on their social media about these causes, then they should expect for people to respond. And I think obviously there is an issue with social media companies like Facebook if their people are inciting violence or posting criminal things on those sites. But what we're really talking about here are things that are really, they're harmful, but they're not. They would say that they're harmful but not illegal. Yeah. They're not necessarily harmful. They're just criticisms of, for example, saying, well, I don't want politics from my ice cream company. I want to buy a coffee. I don't want you to shove political activism down my throat. And so they need to expect that people are going to respond in this way. And what they obviously are trying to do is use their clout as a company with 30 odd million followers on Facebook to say to Facebook, no, I want you to run your platform by my rules, or I'll withdraw from your platform.
Yes. And do you think this is a sort of a cynical development? Because, I mean, I remember the good old days of when, television advertising was all about the product. It's the real thing was one of those slogans that Coca-Cola used for years and years and years. And all they were promoting was Coca-Cola. They weren't promoting a way of life. They weren't promoting a political discourse. They weren't promoting any particular right or left-wing thinking. They were just promoting Coca-Cola. And I just wonder if a lot of these companies have worked out that if they are seen to be virtue signalling, they will get more customers.
It's a really good point. Ben and Jerry's actually came out and explicitly said that their campaign to, as they put it, dismantle white supremacy wasn't some cynical PR campaign. But to some degree, perhaps it isn't, because their head of activism used to work for Bernie Sanders. So these are obviously things that some of these companies are very committed to. They see their companies as being platforms for their social activism. But perhaps on some level, and I think this is what winds people up so much, is that it is a sort of virtue signalling. And they do seem to be using political causes or other people's experiences as a way of promoting their companies. And sometimes, of course, as they did with charity Mermaid, Starbucks would have raised an awful lot of money for that charity. But that is what gets people's backs up, because they, as you say, they want their companies to be companies and to focus on the product. And the phrase "go woke, go broke." Well, this is a perfect example of Starbucks trying to escape market forces when it comes to people's opinions about their social and political activism.
Yes, and is there also a part of them which thinks if they do it, it might save themselves from getting blacklisted or something by some woke groups who say, don't buy, coffee from Starbucks. They don't say anything nice about what we should be doing. They don't say anything at all. Or maybe even as simple as not having a brick thrown through their window during the next kind of big protest.
It must be based on perception, because if they're right about the sorts of responses they get on Facebook, it's mostly people saying, I'm not going to buy my coffee from you anymore because I don't agree with this political cause. Or even perhaps they might agree with the political cause, but just don't think it's appropriate for a company that's supposed to sell coffee to be going so woke, as you might say.
Yeah.
And I think if you look back to 2020, Starbucks was one of the companies that backed the Stop Hate for Profit campaign, which you'll probably remember from your two favourite people, Harry and Meghan, also supported it.
Yes.
And that campaign was essentially an attempt to try to get Facebook to moderate their platforms in line with, I guess you might say, a particular ideological perspective. And I think that this is another attempt perhaps by Starbucks to get Facebook to try to moderate their platform in accordance with Starbucks's ideas about what should be allowed in terms of free speech. And so I think that in that sense, this is possibly, it could be a cynical leak, because this came out through a leak to BuzzFeed. But I think that that's possibly what they're trying to do, is use their clout to try to force platforms like Facebook to run by Starbucks's rules.
Yes, I think that's probably true. Speaking of Meghan, actually, I haven't mentioned her today yet, but I should really, because she's all over the papers this morning talking about how many people have suffered, particularly women, and particularly women of colour who have suffered during the pandemic while wearing Princess Diana's £17,800 Cartier watch.
She's unbelievable, isn't she?
She really is.
Another person like these companies that I fear people won't be able to identify with, to use their own language.
No, I think it is a bit of a strange one, that. Well, Emma, thank you very much indeed. I'll see you for a cup of coffee soon. It may or may not be in Starbucks. We shall see what goes on. Emma Webb, their social commentator, about the ridiculous kind of politicisation of coffee firms, ice cream firms. Why don't you just sell the ice cream? Just sell the coffee. We're not really interested in you selling any political ideas to us. Do you not get that? 0344 499 1000